Hello, and thank you for joining the Bariatric Medicine Institute today. Today we are learning about one thing that if we were to empty our pantry of it, not only would we lose weight, but we could also improve our health. My name is Dr. Margarita McDonald. I am the medical director at the Bariatric Medicine Institute. We are a physician-led medical weight loss center located in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia. So this ingredient is high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is used in almost every packaged food and soft drink that Americans consume on a daily basis. And I'm not talking about fructose that's in fruit. What I'm talking about is super concentrated fructose in the form of high fructose corn syrup. And what happens is a good thing goes bad. So we have way too much fructose ingestion in our food, and then we start to have bad things happen. So in the liver, we can have fatty liver disease, which can lead to cirrhosis and sometimes liver cancer. And we can have insulin resistance, which can lead to prediabetes and diabetes. So let's go over some terminology. So the first one is glucose. Now, glucose is an energy source that almost every cell in our body can use. When we eat food, the glucose goes into the intestines and gets absorbed and goes into our bloodstream. And insulin is a hormone that then recognizes that glucose and helps the cells to pull the glucose into the cell. It pulls it out of the blood, and therefore the blood sugar returns to normal after a meal. And that sugar is inside of the cell, and the cell will either use it as energy, or liver or muscle cells will then store it as glycogen. Now, fructose is also a natural source. It comes from fruit, sometimes some vegetables, and other things like honey and maple syrup. These have natural forming forms of fructose. Now, the natural forms of fructose are a complex blend of nutrients and fiber along with fructose. And in this way, it is more than just the plain fructose that is seen in high fructose corn syrup. Now, as you will see, there is also table sugar, which is sucrose. So now sucrose is a combination of glucose and fructose. Together, they're called a disaccharide, di for two and saccharide for sugar. Glucose and fructose by themselves are monosaccharides and mono for one. The two molecules are bound together by oxygen, and as a result, it is a disaccharide. So it is more complex, and it requires digestion to break it down into its individual parts. Now, high fructose corn syrup is also a blend of glucose and fructose, but this is a chemical sweetener blend. Now, if you look over to the right, there's a whole process here as to how high fructose corn syrup is being made. So it starts with corn kernels, and for those of you that already know, corn is not a vegetable. It is a carbohydrate. So when it is soaked, the starch gets removed. So what happens is it's soaked for very long periods of time, 30 to 40 hours, and part of the process to remove the starch, it gets ground up, it gets put into a powder, it gets dried, the starch is removed, and then some enzymes are added to convert that into glucose, and some more enzymes are added to convert that into fructose. And by the time you go through all of this process with fermentation and all kinds of enzymes and yeast, then you get this product called high fructose corn syrup. Now, high fructose corn syrup is a compound that was first created in a science lab in the 1950s. In the late 1960s, a Japanese scientist was able to find a way to mass produce this conversion, and then it started to be used in food. In the late 1970s, there were tariffs or taxes on sugar beet, which is the fructose that's used in table sugar, and cane sugar, which is the glucose portion for the table sugar. And so that made them very expensive. And at the same time, there were all of these subsidies, so breaks for corn farmers. And so corn was really cheap. So they were able to take this science that was presented and convert this corn into a very cheap alternative and a sweetener. And this started in the late 1970s and continued until about its peak around 2005, when it started to be noticed that there was something going wrong with high fructose corn syrup. Now, high fructose corn syrup was great for processed foods. It was so cheap that it allowed your 8-ounce soda with table sugar in it to be converted to a 20-ounce soda without changing the production process at all, as far as cost. So in processed foods, it helps. It prevents freezer burn. The bread is nice and soft. It makes things look brown and nice and pretty. It extends the shelf life so your product can live longer. And it has a low glycemic index, which is what it converts into sugar. So it sounds great. Now, it can be mixed into anything. It's a liquid, so unlike a sugar that's a powder, it can mix and blend very nicely. So it can be in soups and cakes and cookies, ketchup, all kinds of places. And it's versatile, so it adds texture, it helps to keep the color, maintains the quality, and enhances flavors. And it's cheap. So some of the foods that have high fructose corn syrup are a lot of our packaged foods. American consumers, when it comes to soft drinks, the beverage industry, 41% of it has transitioned over to high fructose corn syrup at this point. Food processing is about 22%. And high fructose corn syrup, unfortunately, is almost always a marker of poor quality food or a nutrient poor food or food substance. So food substance meaning it's not even representing any food, and nutrient poor food meaning that there's no nutritional value to the food. You're eating the food, you're getting calories, you're getting sugar, but you're not getting any nutritional value. So why is high fructose corn syrup worse than regular table sugar, which has fructose in it, or fructose from fruit? So just a reminder, glucose that can be used by any cell, and fructose can only be used by the liver, and it ends up breaking it down into glucose to be used by our body. When we eat extra glucose, our body actually feels full. So there's this feedback mechanism that happens, and it prevents us from overeating. That doesn't happen with fructose. So there's no feedback mechanism. That fullness is not there. So you can eat more and not feel full. And the more you eat, the more you metabolize. So the more fructose you're eating, especially in these high concentrated volumes, the more you're converting it into glucose. At some point, your body doesn't need any more glucose. And then this liver will start converting it into fatty acids, such as triglycerides, and into actual fat molecules that get stored into the liver. And this becomes the form of fatty liver disease. So if you can see over here on this chart, the difference between the light gray and the dark gray was a study in which healthy individuals were given the same caloric diet, but instead of glucose being the main form of sugar, they were given fructose. And what happened over an 8-week period of time is that those that had fructose ended up having an increase in their visceral adipose tissue, which is the VAT. Now, your visceral adipose tissue is the stuff under your ribs. So that's the stuff that's in your liver, surrounds your heart, is around your pancreas, and those organs we need to work well. And if they're being crowded by fat, they end up having dysfunction. Now, another study showed that normal healthy subjects, when they were overfed fructose, produced new fat in the liver 6 times the amount and 79% increase in those triglycerides. So if you look at this chart here, the white is a bar with people that in the study only were fed glucose. The ones with the diagonal lines were actually being given fish oil, so omega-3s, which is a benefit, and you can see it goes down just a slight little bit. There was some improvement. The black bar is high fructose corn syrup, and you can see it doesn't quite double, but it almost does at that 79%. And the horizontal lines are high fructose corn syrup with fish oil. So you can still see that there's a benefit to having fish oil, but not if you're eating high fructose corn syrup. And one more study actually took some young men and gave them Kool-Aid. So half of the group had Kool-Aid that was made from glucose, and the other was made from fructose. And within 7 days of this study, they found that the group that had fructose in their Kool-Aid actually had more insulin resistance. So what they did is they would give these individuals insulin and see how their body responded as far as pulling the sugar into the cells. After 7 days, those that were on the glucose side of the study, their insulin worked exactly how it should. The cells responded exactly how it should. However, on the fructose side, 25% less of the cells were working, meaning there was more sugar or glucose in the bloodstream and this for the same amount of insulin. So to get it to work better, you would need to give them more insulin. And this is called insulin resistant. So this study showed that healthy subjects were already on their way to developing type 2 diabetes in 7 days. Now, mind you, in this study, 25% of the caloric intake was in the form of either glucose or fructose. So it was a good amount, but there are people out there that take in this much sugar. Now, just to give you some background on the cells and how it works as far as insulin and glucose. So the top cell is a normal cell. The normal cell has these receptors and insulin goes to those receptors. So what happens is the glucose goes into your bloodstream. Those are the little red dots. And insulin, the little blue dots, is like, hey, there's some glucose here. Let me go bind to the receptor. And the receptors are the dark blue. The receptors then open and the channels will allow the glucose to go into the cell. With abnormal signaling, which is the cell that's further down, you have a lot of glucose in this bloodstream and you have about the same amount of insulin, but the receptors aren't listening to the insulin. So glucose doesn't enter the cell, it stays in the bloodstream. And to get that much glucose into the cell, you need much more insulin. So glucose in the bloodstream at high levels is what? It's diabetes. And insulin is a fat storage hormone. So if I need more insulin to communicate with my cells to get the same response, then I'm going to make more fat cells. And then with more fat cells, the fat cells are the ones that store energy. So then they need more insulin to talk to them because they don't listen very well. And therefore, I'm going to need more insulin and make more fat cells. And so this cycle keeps repeating, and this leads to obesity. Now, these are just some examples of what liver looks like. If any of you have ever had liver with maybe, I feel like your grandma, some onions, liver is a great source of iron, but is very high in cholesterol. The normal liver is the one on the left. It is a more dark red, maroon color. If you look at the little square behind it, those are pictures of the cells. They have those little dark purple dots inside of them. Those are the nucleus where all the data is for the cells, and it looks nice and organized and pretty. If you move over to the second side, you have two pictures up top. If you notice, the liver on the bottom looks a little bit more yellow, and that's because it has fat cells in the liver. Those little blank empty spaces in the little squares, those are fat cells. So the fat cells are being deposited into the liver and taking up space, crowding the liver. And what ends up happening is eventually the liver cells get really irritated and they start to die. And then you start to get scarring, which is seen in the next picture. And to break it down a little further, you have a healthy liver, it leads to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and then it leads to steatosis, which is NASH, which is scarring, and cirrhosis is basically a shell of a liver. And if you look further down at the bottom, you have nice, pretty cells that look all nice and organized, and as it goes further down the line, the pictures get uglier and uglier. There's fat cells in the middle of things, the nucleus isn't in the cell anymore, you have cells dying, you have collagen, which is scarring, to start to form. And then by the time you get to cirrhosis, you have scarring of your liver. And what also can happen is this fatty liver disease can also lead to an increased risk of liver cancer. So take home message, don't buy products with high fructose corn syrup. Companies are starting to get smart. They know that people are starting to read labels and know that there's something with high fructose corn syrup. What is it? Why is it bad? So they're starting to change the way that they're labeling. So sometimes you'll see fructose instead of high fructose corn syrup, and it'll say contains no high fructose corn syrup, but it's actually manufactured with the 90% high fructose corn syrup, which is high fructose HS HFCS90, which is 90% pure fructose, so even more concentrated. So be careful. Read your labels. Look out: peanut butter, jelly, barbecue sauce, ketchup, salad dressings, yogurt, bread, cookies, animal cookies. It's in so many things. Your pasta sauces. You also want to look at medications, especially children's medications. Children's medications can have high fructose corn syrup as the sweetener to make the medicine taste a little better, because with children's medicine, it's in liquid form. So, when you're looking at what are foods that you can get rid of in your diet that will help you to be healthier, not only will it not promote weight gain by not having high fructose corn syrup, your liver will be healthier, you will have less chance of developing diabetes and fatty liver disease. If you enjoyed what you heard today, feel free to connect with us. We are doing weekly educational pieces, whether in blog form or in webinar, and we will have some educational webinars that you can participate in. So look forward to those. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, and you can always go to our website, www.bmigoals.com. Upcoming, we have a few things left with our January series. Our January series was Habits for a Healthier Life. Next week, we'll be learning about one habit that you can do for physical activity. And the next will be along behavioral health lines at the end of January. In February, we're going to be doing some great educational series, so keep out an eye for that to find out what's going on. And we'll be enrolling in some virtual exercise classes. We'll have a morning one and an evening one on different days of the week. So we'd love for you to join us once we get those started. Find out more at our website. And if you struggle with obesity, talk to your primary care doctor. There are medications that are on the market approved for weight loss. You can find an obesity medicine specialist at any of these websites that are listed below, or you can come talk to us. Check us out on our website, give us a call, check us out on social media. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. These are my resources. Thank you.